I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. New York bishops meet with Governor Cuomo. We'll hear from Bishop DiMarzio in Albany. Plus, 1 year later, looking back at the earthquake and tsunami in Japan. And during the off-season, some football players team up to lend a hand.
The entrance of the school is gone. The library is gone. You could see where some of the classrooms were at.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The state's capital was the backdrop for a meeting between Governor Andrew Cuomo, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio, and their fellow bishops from across the state. We kept a close eye on Albany just 1 day before 1,000 Catholics travel to the capital for their annual Lobby Day tomorrow, listening intently for any word about whether both sides were making headway. New York State bishops introduced top legislative priorities such as preserving Catholic schools and supporting affordable housing and employment for low-income individuals and families. Also a topic of discussion, the church's opposition to the Reproductive Health Act. It's controversial legislation that would ensure abortion remains legal in New York, legislation which the governor supports. And while both sides may not have agreed on every issue, Cardinal Dolan called the experience a, quote, particularly friendly and substantive meeting with the governor. And if this is not a sign of the general positive nature of the discussions, in a formal proclamation issued today by Governor Andrew Cuomo, he declared this week Timothy Cardinal Dolan Week in New York State, a tribute to the Archbishop of New York in honor of his elevation to the College of Cardinals. As I mentioned, Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio was also front and center at this very timely meeting. He too expressed the general tone of the meeting was conciliatory. I spoke with him about it earlier today and what progress, if any, was being made in Albany. And Bishop DiMarzio, what was the general tone of the day's meeting?
Well, today we've met with the governor and the head of the Senate. We're just waiting to meet with the head of the Assembly. Very positive meetings, not much disagreement on the issues we presented, the difficulties of having some of them get through, like we spoke about tuition tax credits and issues of the farm worker bill that's pushing around up here. But in general, I would say there's a good reception and a very positive atmosphere. I think it reflects the more positive atmosphere in Albany altogether.
And among the main issues, Bishop, did the Reproductive Health Act come up at today's meeting?
It did. It seems that the Senate will not be taking it up, which is good news, and so that's a good sign.
With the talk on the funding for Catholic schools, Bishop, I know that's been a very, very important issue for us lately. How much headway did we make there?
Well, it seems there's significant headway has been made. Certainly in the Senate and with the governor's opinion on it. Just that the Assembly now has to pass a bill that reflects the Senate, where we would be able to get the back funding over us for the mandated services. So we see some positive developments.
Okay, and this is a two-day meeting in a sense, Bishop DiMarzio. Will you be there for tomorrow's Catholics at the Capitol? Yes,
I will. I'll be here. In fact, the Cardinal has to go to Washington for the Administrative Board of the Bishops' Conference, so I'm the Vice President of the conference, and I will be here representing him at various events.
And I know that there will be a lot of prayer. I know the Knights of Columbus will be joining you out there for a rosary prayer leading session as well. And will you be part of that?
Yes, I will.
And will there be even more talks with legislatures that you know of, and will you be part of those discussions? And what do you think will be brought up at those meetings?
Well, again, we have everybody scattering to the various legislators that represent their districts to see them, to let them know we're here, we're interested, and the same issues that we brought up with the governor and the heads of the various houses, that they will be saying the same thing.
And some encouraging news we were getting from this meeting, Bishop DiMarzio, Cardinal Dolan saying that he received some consolation from Governor Cuomo, who assured him that he does want to protect religious freedom. Was that the sense you were getting throughout the course of this meeting and the day's events?
Well, certainly from the governor and Mr. Skelos. We're just about to meet with the head of the Assembly, and we haven't spoken to him yet, but it seems like a rather positive thing.
And Bishop DiMarzio, I understand you're holding a reception for legislators this afternoon. Do you expect anything to come of that?
Well, we're going to speak to the legislators from Brooklyn and Queens. encourage them a bit that we want to work with them and some of the issues that we brought up with the others we're going to bring up with them.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Bishop DiMarzio. Sounds
Oh,
like we
you're
made
welcome.
some headway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meanwhile, Cardinal Timothy Dolan revealed today that the church was burned by Senate Republicans last year on the vote to legalize same-sex marriage. Cardinal Dolan told the Daily News that the bishops were assured by GOP senators that the bill to legalize same-sex marriage did not have a chance at passage. Dolan says the bishops appreciated Senate Republicans standing with them on the issue and says it was as much the bishops' fault as anyone else's that there was not more opposition to the measure. Stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. The continuing saga of a priest in Maryland who famously refused to give communion to a woman at her mother's funeral. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faubles. Coming up later, some football players get a new game plan to help tornado victims. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. In a story that's been getting a lot of play on Catholic blogs, a priest who famously refused to give a woman communion at a Maryland parish is now on administrative leave. Father Marcel Guarnicio reportedly refused to administer the sacrament because the woman was in a same-sex relationship. Now, in a letter read at St. John Neumann Parish in Gaithersburg, Maryland, parishioners were informed that Father Marcel's priestly faculties were removed. According to the letter, the Vicar General of the Washington Archdiocese received, quote, credible allegations that the priest engaged in intimidating behavior toward parish staff and others. It is not clear that the action taken is actually connected to Father Marcel refusing to give communion to the woman in the same-sex relationship. Well, a funeral was held today at a Catholic church on Long Island for a war correspondent who was killed in Syria. The Associated Press reports that hundreds of mourners came to St. Dominic's Church in Oyster Bay for the funeral of Marie Colvin. Colvin, a Queens native, was a reporter for the Sunday Times of London. She was killed on February 22nd when an army mortar struck the building she was working in. No stranger to the perils of her career, Colvin wore an eye patch after losing her left eye in 2001 while covering the civil war in Sri Lanka. Well, a pastor at a church in New Jersey was seriously injured when a fire broke out in his rectory. The newspaper The Record reports Father James Riley sustained burns on more than 40% of his body and is hospitalized in critical condition. The fire broke out at around 1 a.m. Saturday morning at the rectory of St. Michael's Church in Palisades Park. Father Riley is in his early 70s and has health issues. Two other priests who live in the rectory were not injured. The Justice Department has blocked a Texas law requiring voters to show a photo ID. The head of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division says the law disproportionately impacts Hispanic residents who he says frequently lack a driver's license or photo ID. It is the second time in 3 months that the Obama administration has blocked a state voter ID law. In December, it struck down a similar measure in South Carolina. Well, 10 people were killed in Nigeria on Sunday when a suicide bomber attacked a Catholic church in Jos during Mass. A state spokesman says the explosion damaged the church's roof, blew out its windows, and damaged part of a fence. No one has claimed responsibility for the deadly attack. The city has been the target of the Islamist group Boko Haram, which has claimed responsibility for attacks that have killed hundreds of people in Nigeria since the start of the year. Meanwhile, Pope Benedict says violence is contrary to the kingdom of God. In his Sunday Angelus prayer, the Pope calls violence a tool of the Antichrist, saying that it never serves humanity but dehumanizes it. Benedict added that Jesus was not a political revolutionary. He says it was impossible to interpret Jesus as a violent person. And on Saturday, the Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury joined Pope Benedict in Rome to celebrate the feast of St. Gregory the Great. Rome Reports has more.
The Anglican primate Rowan Williams traveled to Rome to pray the Vespers at the Basilica of San Gregorio al Celio. He was there for the 1000th anniversary of the Order of Camaldoli in Italy. Joining him was Pope Benedict XVI. Over 1,400 years ago, St. Augustine of Canterbury departed from this basilica with 40 other monks to spread the gospel in England. The site is now a place of pilgrimage to both Anglicans and Catholics. With them were members from the College of Cardinals, as well as representatives from the Anglican Church.
Insieme con Sua Grazia, l'Arcivescovo di Canterbury, che insieme con noi riconosce questo monastero come luogo nativo del legame tra il cristianesimo nelle terre britanniche e la Chiesa di Roma.
This was the third time that an Anglican primate has visited with the Pope in the home of St. Gregory the Great. For the ceremony, a Celtic stone cross was brought from Canterbury and placed in the basilica.
To be immersed in the sacramental life of Christ's body requires the daily immersion of contemplation. Without this, we cannot see one another clearly. Without it, we shall not truly recognize and love one another and grow together in his one holy, Catholic, and apostolic body.
Yes, welcome.
Yes. Thank you for your hospitality.
On that same morning, the two held a private meeting at the Vatican. They discussed relations between the two churches, as well as an exchanging of gifts.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, a convert to Catholicism, has come out in support of same-sex marriage in the United Kingdom. The news came on the same weekend a letter opposing same-sex marriage from two English archbishops was read at all masses in the UK. Blair, who says he strongly supports the rights of same-sex couples to marry, converted to Catholicism in 2007 after leaving office. The Anglican bishops who serve in the House of Lords will reportedly oppose a measure that could lead to a Catholic becoming the English monarch. Bishop Tim Stevens, who leads the group known as the Lords Spiritual, says allowing a monarch to marry a Catholic could pose a serious risk. Stevens is concerned that children who may be in line to the throne would have to be raised Catholic. The reigning monarch is also the supreme governor of the Church of England. The bishops say it would be impossible for a Catholic to hold that position and could lead to the dissolution of the Church of England. Prime Minister David Cameron says he would like to see the ban of monarchs being married to Catholics overturned. No such ban exists for people of other faiths. The anonymous hackers are again taking responsibility for an attack at the Vatican. Vatican Radio is the latest target. The hackers leaked the personal information of Vatican Radio employees, claiming the station's signals have caused higher than normal cancer rates in the vicinities of its transmitters. Now, last Monday, the anonymous hackers took down the Vatican's main website for much of the day. Back in this country, the Doonesbury comic strip will have a new temporary home. Many newspapers have decided to move the strip to their op-ed pages or not run the strip at all, as it lampoons a new abortion law in Texas. The measure requires women to get an ultrasound before having an abortion. In the Doonesbury strip, a woman seeking an abortion is instructed to wait in a, quote, shaming room while filling out paperwork. Universal Press Syndicate reportedly offered a replacement Doonesbury comic strip for papers that did not want to run the strip on the abortion law. The Catholic League is accusing an atheist group of a frontal assault on anti-Catholicism. The ad by the Freedom from Religion Foundation bears the headline, quote, "It's time to consider quitting the Catholic Church." Billed as an open letter to liberal and nominal Catholics, it asks these Catholics why they are aiding and abetting a church that has repeatedly engaged in a crusade to ban contraception, abortion, and sterilization. The ad also accused the church of causing acute misery, poverty, needless suffering, and unwanted pregnancies. Catholic League President Bill Donahue says that not a single Catholic who reads the ad will be impelled to leave the church. He says the issue is the increase in hate speech directed at the church. Steps are reportedly being taken for a South African to get its first saint. South African media is reporting that the church will soon consider whether to declare a man killed in 1990 as blessed. Benedict Daswa was beaten to death after declining to participate in hiring a, quote, diviner to help discover the source of recent lightning strikes in the area. Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Coming up, another day of mourning 1 year after Japan's devastating earthquake and tsunami. Welcome back. On the 1-year anniversary of the devastating earthquake and tsunami in Japan, the Archbishop of Osaka is asking Catholics to pray. In a letter to Japanese Catholics, the Archbishop says that what happened on March 11th of last year will never be forgotten in our time. The Archbishop asked for prayers for those who died and for the reconstruction of the country. Yesterday, Japan's Emperor Akito remembered the victims.
I'd like to express my mourning for the people that passed away 1 year ago. We were attacked by an unprecedented earthquake and tsunami, and almost 20,000 people died, and many people were missing. Many of them were firefighters and people who tried to help people at the loss of their own people. We should never forget them.
And 1 year later, some closure for a family who lost a son. CNN's Kyung La has that story.
Amid the terror of the tsunami, the cries of children mourning as a desperate family drove their dead son to an evacuation center for an impromptu funeral at this car. 16-year-old Hiroki Sugawara was under this blanket, his body pulled from the wreckage of his grandparents' home, killed as the tsunami swept the Rikuzen Takata last year. Don't give up hope, Hiroki's father pleaded with the boy's friends. Keep living for my son. This was the best a grieving father could do to honor his son as the thousands of dead victims overwhelmed the region. It has taken an entire year. Hiroki's father is now finally giving his son the funeral ceremony the boy never got. Hiroki's surviving younger brothers and his mother gathered with relatives at this Buddhist temple. Time has passed. The pain has not. He was just 16, Hiroki's father tells me. He'd be 17 today.
It was a chaotic time.
It was. I wasn't sure we could hold a ceremony for him at the time. It was the last time he would ever see his friends. I wanted to give him that farewell. Hiroki's father says his son was a sweet boy, always smiling and laughing. He loved soccer and his friends. Most of all, he loved the coastal city that now lies in ruin. The total number of people killed or missing stands at just under 20,000. Only about 5% of those are children. But for the parents, it is the cruelest part of this disaster. For burying your child defies a natural order. It's already been 1 year, says Hiroki's father. I still don't know what to say or how to describe how I feel. Hiroki's family moved away from this city 5 years ago. But the boy wanted to spend the rest of his childhood here, so he moved in with his grandparents. He loved Rikuzen Takata, says his father, which is why they're planning on burying his ashes here. Although the house and town are gone, says Hiroki's father, we feel like we can see him here.
You still feel his spirit here?
I feel his spirit is always here. For me, says Hiroki's father, that day 1 year ago never stopped. I feel it. Always.
That report from CNN's Kyung La. Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. When we return, outside the huddle, these football players spring into action with a different game plan.
I mean, sometimes they come as a full crew, sometimes they come in 2 or 3 people, and we get them together with a crew of about 10.
Finally tonight, it devastated the South and Midwest, a series of deadly tornadoes. In some regions, residents are still waiting to hear about federal assistance. Reporter Katie Bauer has more from southern Indiana.
It was a town hall meeting where very few were left out.
We're trying to do everything we can to make it a successful recovery.
At Daisy Hill United Methodist Church, Clark County officials met with residents to offer vital information and a message of hope. Borden had its share of pure devastation after the tornado ripped through on Friday.
It's been tough, but everybody's helping everybody, and that really makes you feel good.
Some came with questions.
Do we wait on FEMA to start before we start picking up our materials?
Others had concerns.
The first 2 days this happened, nobody come to help us.
What's left of Vicki Jackson's home will be taken down this weekend.
I try not to cry, but there ain't nothing you can do. You look around and everything you've grown up with is gone. Everything.
Clark County Commissioner Ed Myers says they are making sure all the communities hit are helped.
We know they're here, I have family up this way too, so we want to do everything we can for them too.
One of the biggest blessings here on Daisy Hill pulled up on Wednesday, a truck full of everyday essentials available to anybody in need.
We didn't know we existed, that's what we felt like. But then after that, then everybody started coming around.
All joining together to rebuild this tight-knit community left torn to shreds.
You just don't know how many good people there is out there until something like this happens. For sure. And then everybody comes together.
That report from Katie Bauer. And some NFL players in the area have decided to provide their own assistance. As we hear from Steve Jefferson, they've sprung into action with a new game plan.
This here peps you up. It brings you up. You know what I mean? It makes you feel wonderful inside. But thank you guys so much.
Volunteers from the Colts football team also showed up in Henryville. Colts wide receiver Blair White and safety Steve Brown got a first-hand look inside the devastated Henryville High School.
The entrance of the school is gone. The library is gone. You could see where some of the classrooms were at. There wasn't much in there.
The school's pretty knocked out, devastated, but they did a really nice job getting all the kids out in time.
The 40-plus Colts employees organized their volunteer visit through the Red Cross. There are also on-site volunteer registration places like this one at Henryville Community Church.
They come in, and sometimes they come as a full crew, sometimes they come in 2 or 3 people, and we get them together with a crew of about 10, and then we send them to a specific place.
Yeah, it looks like they might reconstruct this completely, so we're just pulling out the bricks, and I think after they're probably gonna like rake everything else and take it out.
And what seems like an overwhelming task, the victims say the outpour from volunteers gives them hope.
And that is all for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, a hometown boy writes a play about Mother Teresa, and we got to check out a performance. That is all for this edition of Currents. Be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. You can also connect with us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.